over the better part of a century.
It had been a central campaign promise, and in February 2008, 3 months after being elected, Australia's new Prime Minister apologised for decades of institutional racism and abuse.
As Prime Minister of Australia, I am sorry. On behalf of the Government of Australia, I am sorry. On behalf of the Parliament of Australia, I am sorry.
How did you feel giving that speech 10 years ago?
I felt as if I had a responsibility, and the responsibility was to begin to set right the wrongs we had administered to Indigenous Australians for the previous 200 years or more.
Watched by Australians across the country, Rudd was specifically saying sorry to the stolen generations, tens of thousands of people who, as children, had been forcibly removed from their families to bring them up, often in institutions, as part of white Australia instead.
You talked in that speech about a new chapter, a new beginning, a new start. Has it been?
Yes. And the reason it has been is that you can't begin a new relationship with somebody which has been breached and ruptured unless you've apologised. That's the first step. But the second step is a more practical one. What do you then do to make restitution for the things that have been done wrong? And that's what our national program of closing the gap between the lives of Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians over the last 10 years has been about.
The initiative, also launched in 2008, was to close the gaps in education, employment, health and life expectancy between Indigenous Australians and everybody else. But targets kept being missed, and still are being missed. On Monday, Australia's current Prime Minister said just 3 of 7 targets are on track to be met.
What would the Kevin Rudd of 2008 make of progress or lack of progress on those closing the gap targets?
I would answer that impossible question by saying that I am pleased that we've made real progress, and equally brutally realistic about where further progress must be made. So when I see changes in the number of Indigenous babies who survive rather than die, when I see real changes in the number of Indigenous 4-year-olds who can now go to preschool, and real changes in terms of the number of Indigenous kids finishing high school, I say we're beginning to turn the corner. But it is like turning the Queen Mary around. It takes time.
And just 3 of the 7 targets that were laid out are being met. Is that disappointing to you?
I would like, of course, to be on track for all 7, but the bottom line is, in all 7, the trend is up and not down. In 3, we're on target to achieve the objectives we set, and they were ambitious objectives. I'd be more worried if the performance was further down. You can choose one of either of 2 courses in history. One is to reconcile. Now, the second is to simply sweep it all under a very uncomfortable and untidy carpet, which is what many countries have done.
Mr Rudd insists Indigenous Australians are better off today because of his apology a decade ago. Andrew Thomas, Al Jazeera, Canberra.